relationship with other men in the film. So I wanted to ask, how gay is the Roman Empire?
The entire empire, or
You ever seen a grown man naked?
I kissed the guy full on the lips, and they.
Joey, you like movies about gladiators?
Nerdrotic.com.
Greetings, you over 1 million hellions and the 40% who haven't subscribed yet. Remember Barbenheimer, a wild weekend of juxtaposed films proving that men and women's tastes are different. And considering Hollywood's views on the whole difference between men and women thing, I promise you this was a complete surprise to them. Still, the meme-fueled weekend catapulted both Barbie and Oppenheimer into the stratosphere. Both films made $1 billion. Okay, Oppenheimer didn't exactly make it, but it's close enough. And both films were nominated for Best Picture, including Oppenheimer running away with it. And it was the shot in the arm Hollywood needed, considering Barbenheimer happened in 2023, the year of the flopbuster. It was a once-in-a-lifetime event, but that's not going to stop Tinseltown, and you can always count on them to learn all the wrong lessons from any of their successes. This brings us to Glicked. No, you're not hearing things. Hollywood is trying to repeat the success of Barbenheimer with Glicked, Gladiator 2, and Wicked. Now, some may argue they got it half right, but that also means they got it half wrong. Admittedly, I've seen both films, so let's get the Glicked portion of this Gladiator 2 review over right now.
Wicked. It was well acted, well shot, well directed. Songs were pretty good, sets were pretty good, effects were pretty good. Everybody seemed to love it. It was the ninth circle of hell for me.
Now, some of you might be asking, what's a straight dude in his 50s going to see Wicked opening night? And that would be a good question. And that video also led to somebody calling me a on X Twitter. Oh my stars and garters. But I'll answer your hypothetical question with this. The last word in this elegant response to my Wicked review is precisely the reason straight men in their 50s go to see Wicked with their wives on date night. So what about Gladiator 2, a film whose idea was floated out there for the past 2 decades and rightly so laughed into obscurity, but considering we're in the parody timeline, it actually got made.
Why are you gay?
Set roughly 2 decades after the events of Gladiator, where Lucius Maximus, the son of Lucilla and General Maximus, witnesses the death of his father at the hands of his uncle Commodus. And yes, I'm gonna butcher all of these Roman names.
You know I don't speak Spanish. In English, please.
For his own safety, young Lucius is sent off to Africa and the country of Numidia, where he grows up and marries the only female archer in the army, who eventually gets killed and sets him off on a journey that's almost exactly like his father's. Because that's exactly what Gladiator 2 is to Gladiator, one of these modern Hollywood soft reboots, best described by my good friend Chris Gore as the Force Awakens of Gladiator. And no, I'm not gonna say I was not entertained like everyone else covering this film is. I refuse to. What I will say after giving this some thought in the empty theater I watched it in is I don't think there's ever been a more mid-movie ever made. It's a solid 5 out of 10, which quite frankly makes it the most difficult to review because, again, it's not terrible, but it's also not good. Of course, it was directed by the 86-year-old Ridley Scott, who's no stranger to going back and screwing up some old franchises. But I'm not gonna crap on Ridley Scott. Man's a legend for Alien and Blade Runner alone. Yes, I wish he'd stop, but he completed a film at 86 years old. That's 4 years older than our current president, who can't complete a sentence. Now, a film is only as good as its writing and its lead, and unfortunately for Paul Mescal, he's got some big sandals to fill following up on Russell Crowe, and unfortunately he doesn't pull it off. He's blandly competent as he watches his wife die, fights CGI monkeys, fights a CGI rhino, fights the practically CGI human Pedro Pascal, and CGI sharks. Considering I watched the now Gladiator franchise as pure fantasy, I'm not going to get too hung up on the historical inaccuracies. Yes, they did fill the Colosseum full of water to reenact naval battles, but I'm pretty sure they didn't have sharks. That's kind of pushing it. But I'll give the CGI sharks this. They did just as good of an acting job as the overrated, overcast Pedro Pascal. You know, the guy who called half the country Confederates and those bad guys from World War II, and for his efforts, he gets cast in absolutely absolutely everything, which will, I think, eventually lead to a soft reboot of Being John Malkovich, being Pedro Pascal, whose performance as General Marcus Acacius, husband to Lucilla, is, and this will be a running theme for this film and his career, completely average. Unfortunately, Gladiator 2 does waste the talents of actors I like, including Emperor Eddie from Stranger Things. I feel like there could have been a lot more with Joseph Quinn and his twin brother, who's also an emperor with syphilis who likes monkeys, but they ended up just being mustache-twirling villains. They also wasted Connie Nielsen coming back, who looks great, but she doesn't do very much, and the legend Derek Jacobi, who, despite only appearing in one episode, is my second favorite master from Doctor Who. But the biggest waste of all, and I guess the best performance, is Denzel Washington, playing Macronus, I don't know what his name is, who is essentially the inverted version of Proximo, played by the late great Oliver Reed.
Have you heard the news? What are you talking about? They made Gladiator 2. How bad was it? It was mid. Rotten as a barrel of spoiled wine.
Who, as some of you may or may not know, died during the filming of Gladiator after challenging two younger sailors to a drinking match, beating them, and then dropping dead. Anyway, back to one of the greatest living actors, Denzel Washington, and this isn't gonna besmirch his career or anything, but it's not his best performance. It's over the top still. It's the more standout in this very, have I mentioned, bland film. But it's really not his fault, because his character, just like this entire story, is completely predictable because we've seen it before in Gladiator, except this time we get a happy ending, and unfortunately that's where this film completely falls apart. As with all soft reboots, it almost completely undoes the events of the first film and the sacrifice by General Maximus. For example, without spoiling too much, there's an entire army at one point after Lucius, and they stop at a gate and he rides past them and no one thinks to shoot an arrow or throw a spear. The whole thing felt rushed, and that's probably because within the 6-month filming process that was delayed by the strike, principal was done in 55 days. And considering the budgets between $250 and $310 million, making it, without adjusting for inflation, the 12th most expensive movie ever made, I'm thinking it's gonna have a hard time making its money back. I don't think anybody was expecting a repeat of Gladiator, which again won Best Picture, and at the time, by many critics, it was considered unworthy of it. I'm not one of those people, but that's critics for you, and having rewatched the original, it holds up really well. What I was hoping for was just a fun action movie, because just like Captain Over, I like movies about gladiators. Now, the biggest takeaway from Gladiator 2 will be a question. Why was this movie even made? And the answer is, Hollywood is lost. As I said before, if 2023 was the Hollywood apocalypse, 2024 would be the post-apocalypse. A year filled with mutant zombie franchises churning out unnecessary prequels, sequels, and animated remakes. Hell, Gladiator 2's sister movie, Wicked, which is the other half of Glicked, and God, that's stupid, which is gonna make mountains of money and probably be nominated for Best Picture, is the first of 2 parts that's an adaptation of a play that's an adaptation of a book, which is essentially fan fiction of another book. And Gladiator 2, along with a lot of other films in this era, will be forgotten, and their only legacy will end up being a very difficult answer to a future trivia question. I would like to say this era is coming to an end, but unfortunately, the creative bankrupt pit is bottomless, where we will actually see Jaws conceived, and later on, his father will be murdered in front of him by a fisherman, setting him on his journey of revenge. I guess if you have to watch Gladiator 2, have it on in the background while you do your taxes or sleep, and what the hell, allow me to be the 3,728th reviewer to say I was not entertained.
Are you not entertained? Are you not entertained?
Nope.
Nerdrotic.com.
If you like what you heard, please like, share, and subscribe. If you didn't like what you heard, I thank you for listening this long. I will see you in the next video.